Thousands of years ago, one ordinary fall could suddenly transform a normal day into a survival crisis. There were no hospitals, ambulances, x-rays, antibiotics, or doctors waiting nearby to rescue him. His first question was brutally simple: could he still stand, walk, and somehow return home? An injury became much more dangerous when it happened several kilometers away from everyone who could help. Being injured didn't stop hunger, thirst, cold nights, changing weather, or animals searching for their next meal. For mobile hunter-gatherers, losing the ability to travel could make everyday survival dramatically more difficult. Food often had to be gathered, tracked, carried, or hunted across landscapes that demanded constant movement. Something as basic as reaching fresh water could suddenly become an exhausting challenge with limited mobility. But Finn possessed something more powerful than speed or strength: other humans who noticed he was missing. For an injured human, cooperation could completely change the chances of making it through the crisis. Someone struggling to walk alone could move farther when companions supported and protected them along the journey. Without companions, even a manageable injury could separate someone from food, shelter, warmth, and protection. Reaching camp solved one problem, but recovery could create entirely new challenges for the whole group. If Finn couldn't collect his own food, somebody else needed to gather enough to support him. Limited mobility could also mean needing assistance with ordinary activities that were normally simple and routine. Caring for an injured companion required valuable time, food, attention, protection, and energy from everyone else. Archaeological remains show that some prehistoric people lived long enough for significant injuries to heal. Even thousands of years later, healed bones can preserve evidence that someone survived serious physical trauma. Substantial healing means something remarkable: the injured person remained alive long enough for their body to recover. Long-term survival after disabling injuries can sometimes suggest assistance from other members of a person's community. Humans didn't survive prehistoric environments only through intelligence or tools. They survived together. Helping an injured companion wasn't separate from survival. Cooperation itself was one of humanity's greatest survival strategies. Unfortunately, cooperation couldn't solve every problem, because ancient injuries carried dangers nobody could even see. Sometimes the original injury wasn't the greatest threat. Complications afterward could become far more dangerous. Without modern medicine, how could ancient humans possibly improve an injured person's chances of surviving? Ancient humans had no medical kits, but they could observe injuries, remember outcomes, and learn from experience. Generation after generation, people could remember which responses seemed helpful and which situations repeatedly ended badly. Most importantly, humans possessed something ancient healers couldn't create themselves: the body's natural ability to repair damage. Sometimes survival depended on something surprisingly simple: having enough protection and support to rest while healing occurred. While Finn recovered, healthier members could temporarily take over tasks he normally performed for the group. An injured person who couldn't escape quickly became especially dependent on companions when danger approached the camp. The challenge became even greater whenever environmental changes forced the entire community to move somewhere new. Supporting someone with limited mobility could slow everyone, making cooperation both valuable and costly. Among the clearest archaeological clues are fractures that healed while prehistoric people were still alive. When fractured bone heals, it can leave lasting changes that researchers may recognize thousands of years later. That healing proves something important: the injury happened, yet somehow the person survived long afterward. A healed injury doesn't automatically prove intensive nursing. Archaeology rarely gives us every detail of someone's recovery. Still, some people clearly survived conditions that would have made everyday prehistoric life considerably more difficult. A damaged leg, injured arm, painful joint, or lost mobility could each create completely different survival challenges. An arm injury could interfere with climbing, carrying food, making tools, gathering plants, or defending yourself. A serious leg injury could make travel, hunting, gathering, escaping danger, and reaching water much harder. Survival could therefore depend on the community temporarily reorganizing its daily activities around someone's limitations. Being unable to travel didn't necessarily mean someone became completely useless to their community. Older or less mobile people could still carry valuable knowledge about landscapes, animals, seasons, and past dangers. Human communities benefited from memory and experience, not merely from whoever could run fastest or lift most. Even when movement improved, ancient humans still faced complications they couldn't understand at the microscopic level. They couldn't see microorganisms or understand modern germ theory, even though infection could threaten recovery. Yet people could notice patterns. Some injuries improved, while others became worse despite everyone's efforts. Repeated experiences could become shared knowledge, remembered by individuals and eventually passed between generations. But could prehistoric humans do anything more than rest, protect, feed, and wait for healing? Ancient humans lived surrounded by plants, animals, minerals, and materials they observed throughout their entire lives. Over generations, communities could remember which materials seemed useful and which ones were best avoided. Unfortunately, plants rarely survive archaeologically as clearly as bones, making ancient medical behavior difficult to reconstruct. That means we must be careful not to turn possibilities into facts about prehistoric treatment. Even Neanderthal remains have sparked fascinating debates about injury, survival, disability, and care within ancient communities. One famous example comes from Shanidar Cave, where researchers discovered Neanderthals who had survived significant physical impairments. Some individuals apparently lived for considerable periods despite conditions that could have made daily activities challenging. Researchers debate exactly how much assistance such individuals required, but their survival remains an important clue. A skeleton cannot tell us every conversation or act of kindness, but it can reveal survival. Now imagine trying to survive while unable to perform every task your companions could perform easily. Physical limitations didn't necessarily erase someone's knowledge, memory, social relationships, or ability to contribute differently. Someone who survived previous dangers might possess knowledge that younger, stronger members simply hadn't learned yet. Experience could reveal where animals moved, where water remained seasonally, and which routes carried unnecessary danger. That kind of information could benefit the entire community even when its owner couldn't perform demanding physical work. Meanwhile, younger humans learned constantly by watching how adults responded when somebody became sick or injured. Helping others wasn't necessarily instinct alone, useful social behavior could also be observed, remembered, and repeated. But caring for an injured person became considerably harder when the environment itself turned against everyone. Cold weather increased demands for shelter, fuel, food, protection, and energy when resources were already limited. When food became scarce, supporting somebody unable to gather could place additional pressure on the entire community. Giving food to another person meant accepting less yourself, especially during difficult seasons. So why would prehistoric humans repeatedly spend precious resources supporting someone who couldn't fully contribute? Today's injured hunter could recover and become tomorrow's provider, protector, teacher, or experienced guide. And in a dangerous world, every healthy person knew they could eventually become the one needing assistance. Helping others created relationships of trust that could become incredibly valuable when circumstances suddenly reversed. Perhaps surviving injury reveals something bigger. Humans became powerful not by standing alone, but by standing together. Recovery wasn't always peaceful. Sometimes danger arrived long before an injured person was ready to move again. Many hunter-gatherer communities moved as resources, seasons, weather, and local conditions changed around them. Remaining behind could mean losing access to food, companionship, protection, and knowledge of where everyone had gone. If an injured companion traveled slowly, the group's movement could sometimes need to change around that limitation. There were no roads. Rivers, steep slopes, loose rocks, mud, and vegetation could turn travel into an obstacle. Even a shallow river could become surprisingly difficult when balance, strength, or mobility had been reduced. A rocky climb that healthy companions crossed quickly might demand patience and assistance from someone still recovering. And another fall during recovery could create new problems before the original injury had fully healed. For hunters, physical injury could temporarily remove them from one of prehistoric life's most demanding activities. The group still needed food, meaning other capable members had to compensate for whoever could no longer participate. Of course, hunting itself exposed ancient humans to falls, animal encounters, difficult terrain, and sudden accidents. Humans lacked enormous claws, protective hides, and the raw strength possessed by many animals around them. Avoiding unnecessary danger was therefore just as important as responding after something had already gone wrong. Experience could teach people which cliffs, animals, weather conditions, or routes carried greater risks. Young humans could learn those dangers by watching adults long before facing every threat themselves. A dangerous experience survived by one person could become valuable knowledge shared throughout the entire community. Someone who survived an accident could later help others recognize the same danger before it happened again. Pain could also discourage movement, naturally forcing an injured person to protect a damaged area during recovery. Yet pain couldn't tell ancient humans exactly what was damaged or whether dangerous complications were developing. Without modern imaging, people couldn't simply look inside the body and identify every hidden injury. Instead, people could watch movement, behavior, recovery, and changes over time while deciding what happened next. Recovery wasn't one dramatic moment. It could mean many ordinary days of gradual change and uncertainty. Standing longer, moving farther, or returning to simple tasks could each represent an important step forward. Eventually, some survivors could return to activities that had seemed impossible immediately after their injury. Yet prehistoric survival was never guaranteed, and many injuries undoubtedly remained beyond what ancient communities could overcome. For every injury someone survived, there were undoubtedly others that prehistoric communities simply couldn't overcome. Ancient humans possessed experience and cooperation, but neither could magically solve every dangerous injury. Ultimately, survival often depended heavily on whether the person's own body could successfully recover. What companions could provide was something incredibly valuable: food, protection, rest, assistance, and time. Sometimes, simply surviving long enough gave the body's natural healing processes an opportunity to continue. But we shouldn't imagine prehistoric camps functioning like primitive versions of today's hospitals. People couldn't understand bacteria, internal bleeding, microscopic damage, or countless other processes hidden inside the body. What they did possess were eyes, memory, experience, communication, and generations of accumulated observation. When similar events happened repeatedly, people could remember patterns even without understanding the science behind them. Before medical books existed, useful information survived only when humans remembered it and passed it forward. Imagine how many accidents humans witnessed during hundreds of thousands of years of living in dangerous environments. A survived mistake could become a warning that prevented someone else from repeating the same dangerous decision. In a world without modern treatment, preventing an accident could be far more valuable than responding afterward. Experienced travelers could recognize unstable terrain, dangerous crossings, animal activity, and approaching weather before younger people could. Sometimes survival wasn't about bravery. It was about recognizing unnecessary danger and simply going somewhere else. Planning allowed humans to reduce risks before strength, speed, or emergency care ever became necessary. No amount of experience could eliminate falling rocks, sudden weather, hidden terrain, or simple human mistakes. When prevention failed, the injured person's greatest advantage was often the presence of other people. A single prehistoric human couldn't simultaneously gather food, maintain shelter, watch for danger, and recover from injury. But several cooperating humans could divide those responsibilities, allowing vulnerable members time they couldn't create alone. The same cooperative system also protected children, older people, and others temporarily unable to contribute equally. Human survival therefore wasn't only about keeping yourself alive. Increasingly, survival belonged to the entire group. A community could preserve knowledge and experience that would disappear forever if every vulnerable individual were abandoned. So surviving injury wasn't simply about healing. It was also about remaining connected to other human beings. Because every survivor could carry memories, skills, relationships, and lessons that strengthened the generations following them. Weeks after his fall, Finn could finally move confidently through the landscape with his companions again. His body recovered, but the memory of one loose rock would remain useful much longer. The next time Finn crossed difficult terrain, he knew exactly why slowing down could matter. His accident could now become knowledge, preventing someone younger from making exactly the same mistake. In that sense, surviving danger could transform an injured person into an unexpectedly valuable teacher. So after everything we've seen, What actually gave prehistoric people their best chance after injury? There wasn't one secret prehistoric cure capable of magically repairing every broken bone or serious accident. First came the body's own ability to repair some kinds of damage when given enough time. Then came something simple but valuable: opportunities to reduce demanding activity while recovery took place. Someone unable to gather normally could survive longer when companions continued sharing available food with them. Someone unable to escape danger quickly could remain safer when other humans stayed nearby. And someone struggling to travel could sometimes keep moving because companions refused to leave them alone. Experience also helped communities recognize dangers, observe recovery, and remember patterns from earlier injuries and accidents. None of this meant prehistoric people could overcome every injury, illness, or complication they encountered. And ancient bones preserve only fragments of stories whose complete details disappeared thousands of years ago. Still, healed injuries give us remarkable evidence that some prehistoric people survived serious challenges long afterward. And sometimes their survival becomes difficult to imagine without at least some assistance from people around them. Long before hospitals existed, humans were already capable of changing another person's chances simply by staying nearby. By sharing food, one human could give another more time for their body to recover. By helping someone travel, several healthy bodies could compensate temporarily for one person's limited mobility. By remembering past accidents, survivors could help future generations avoid dangers they had personally experienced. The person receiving help today might eventually become the person providing it to somebody else tomorrow. Perhaps humanity's greatest survival tool was never a spear, stone blade, shelter, or even fire. It was our extraordinary ability to cooperate, share burdens, preserve knowledge, and care for one another. Ancient humans survived injuries because survival was rarely one person's fight. It was something humans faced together. This story began hundreds of thousands of years before anyone could understand what was happening inside an injured body. And somehow, generation after generation, injured humans recovered often enough for healed bones to enter the archaeological record. Behind every healed injury was a real person who once experienced fear, difficulty, uncertainty, and eventually recovery. Perhaps their accident happened suddenly, during an ordinary morning that initially seemed completely safe. Maybe it happened while hunting, when attention was divided between animals, companions, weapons, and dangerous terrain. A simple climb for food or a better view could become dangerous with one misplaced hand or foot. Not every injury required an exciting adventure. Ordinary prehistoric work could create accidents too. There were no protective helmets, modern footwear, safety rails, emergency vehicles, or instant communication when something went wrong. An injury beside camp and the same injury far away could create completely different survival situations. If companions knew where you had gone, they had a much better chance of noticing your absence. Living in small social groups meant people could notice when a familiar face suddenly failed to return. And searching as a group could accomplish something an isolated injured person simply couldn't do alone. For someone unable to travel, seeing familiar companions approaching could mean the difference between isolation and another chance. Suddenly there were extra eyes watching for danger, extra hands carrying resources, and companions helping with movement. Getting back could still take hours, but now Finn no longer had to solve every problem himself. Sometimes darkness might arrive before the group reached safety, forcing everyone to adapt their plans. A temporary delay was far easier to face when several humans could watch, gather, plan, and cooperate. When daylight returned, the group could continue moving with better visibility and another opportunity to reach camp safely. From the accident until recovery, almost every advantage Finn gained came from having other people nearby. Archaeology cannot recreate Finn's story, but real ancient survivors leave clues suggesting similarly remarkable journeys occurred. Sometimes a healed bone tells us the ending. Whatever happened, this individual survived long enough to recover. What bones usually cannot reveal is exactly who helped, what they felt, or how difficult recovery became. We can follow archaeological evidence without pretending we know details that disappeared forever with the people themselves. Some prehistoric humans survived significant injuries, and human cooperation could make survival considerably easier for vulnerable group members. Long before modern medicine, our ancestors already possessed something extraordinary: other humans willing to help them survive.